topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Are you ready to take a journey? Let's connect with the healers of the world. It's that time. It's time for the Language of Healing on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Now here's your host, Emotional Wisdom Training Specialist Nicole Fortin.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Language of Healing on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Today, straight from the horse's mouth, we're going to be looking at the language of healing through the animal kingdom, and in particular through horses, because horses are quite magical creatures. They're functional, they're friendly, like we have a human connection with them, but they've also really been staples in our evolution of they've always been our trusted partners. And today I think this is going to be a great conversation around how horses reflect the energy of ourselves and those around us. Because if you've been around horses and have spent much time, or if you haven't, you still can appreciate that connection that humans and horses have had through generations and how they've supported us in really evolving as a species. And I'm so excited to be putting some attention towards these animals. And our guest today is quite an expert in this, with horses, and also in the realm of how humans can heal with horses and vice versa. And she's done a lot of work with teenagers and supporting, that growth and support and confidence in people through this, because they really do reflect our energy. Amanda will definitely talk more about this as she's the expert, but that how we are showing up really reflects how others around us respond. And so I love the idea of horses being this mirror on the stall. So let's just take a moment to anchor in for today. And wherever you are, however you're tuning in today, watching us on the TV or tuning in on the podcast or the radio station, just sit or feel a little bit that grounding sensation in your body. So your feet are planted, your hips are rooted, and your back and spine are just sitting effortlessly. And think about your situation, your life, and those that are playing a role in that, and how they support you in your growth and evolution as a human being. And just noticing how others really play that part in showing you more of yourself and give you that opportunity to really explore more of yourself. Relationships are great. How we interact with others and in relationship to others that's a mirror in itself. But I'm really excited to talk more about how the animal kingdom can be that mirror and that reflective, that resource for us to heal and grow and evolve a little bit more. And so let's introduce our guest for today, Amanda Kumiko Kent. She is a Equine Guided Leadership Coach. Hello, Amanda.
Hi, how are you doing, Nicole?
Oh, I'm very good, thank you.
Good. This could only be better if we could actually get together.
I know, right? Yeah, it's true. And have the horses with us.
Yes. I was hoping we could be out with them today, but the wind is a howling out there. It has its own things to say today. So we brought it inside for a little bit.
All right. That's fine. I think you bring the whole essence of it with you. So now horses are, I mean, when I think of a horse, I think of the power and the strength and the bigness of it, and it can be a little bit intimidating to really approach an animal that's that size, unless you have some training or experience with that. So, I mean, as a basic beginner that knows nothing about how horses can help us, what would you say to that?
I think it's an amazing look at all of the different archetypes of the horse that people bring in. You could do your own study just on people in a room watching horses and what do they symbolize for each different person, because it's fascinating. You yourself first brought up power and strength and the bigness of it all. You could ask the same thing to somebody else and they might say the freedom and the swiftness and the movement, and someone else would say the gentleness and the caring and the touch are the things that they think about. And I love looking at that in itself is a reflection of what people are feeling and what maybe is happening in their lives, or what they're dealing with within themselves, just within those archetypes. And as you mentioned before, they have been a part of human history for eons, for forever. The advancement of human civilization was really begat on the back of a horse. Until then, we were limited in our range and our distance and where we could go. But this partnership that developed, we can argue and pick scientifically at why did this large creature decide to join up with this little creature, and there are all kinds of theories on that. But in the long run, it's a pretty special and very amazing thing to look at that natural partnership that developed, and how much we have really relied on each other until really the last 75 to 100 years. If you think of all of humanity, they've been a part of civilization until just the modernization and the mechanization of everything. And I wonder now if that is part of what our hearts are missing. This large animal, this confidant, this non-judgmental energy source that we were with every day to make our lives happen until relatively recently in the scheme of things.
Yeah, I know, it's really interesting, like because that's a built-in connection that you're dealing with every day, and it's a symbiotic relationship, right? Like you're working with each other and taking care of each other. And we definitely don't have that as much, right? We have more technology, information, industrial kind of stuff going on, but maybe that is a bit of a side tangent.
But I
so
like it's fascinating. And now that we're
Yeah.
reaching for this thing, and we've created equine coaching methods and equine therapy methods, and other ways so that we can rejoin this connection that we lost. And I find that fascinating, right? If you said equine therapy, equine coaching 100 years ago, then they would think you would need therapy.
Yeah, for sure.
Well,
okay,
now,
so
we're just
I was
searching for it. And the archetypes that everybody comes up with is fascinating, and how those are reflected when we get them next to these horses.
Yeah, so true. Well, I just spent some time at my old family heritage site. So they came from Minnesota to Alberta in the late 1800s, and that would have been on the carriage by horse, traveling the country, and then, getting to your piece of land, turning your carriage into your home, using the horses, like acquiring the materials to build your house, your barn, and just I just have such reverence for that, because it's like without that, we wouldn't be here today. And so I love, whether we've separated from it a little bit, but I love that it's still there and available to us. as something that can help support us, just keep moving forward.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I find also another great reflection of the different time it took, this rhythmical, steady motion that it took to get anywhere or do anything, and how hurried we've rushed everything now. We call it horse time in a lot of our programs. We've got to slow things back down to horse time a little bit before everything's just rushing past us, or we're so busy rushing past everything else, we miss the signals that we should have been receiving.
Right. Yeah, so I guess that's where I was coming from with the strength and the power is that, that carries us forward. But I really like the different archetypes because they do represent so many different things to each individual. So do you have then, how many horses do you have? What does a equine guided leadership look like, feel like?
Well, a session can be done in many ways. It could be done one-on-one with one horse, to anywhere to 4 or 5 horses in some of our larger exercises. But the beautiful part is I've got 6 great horses out here that I love to use, and I've used many horses in different places. This is all coming from a horse's natural instinct. This is part of what's just inherent with them. This is not anything we're training into these horses. This is something that they naturally do, and a connection we naturally have in us when we take the time to reconnect with it. So, for example, if I'm down in Colorado and we do some programs down there, I'm working with horses that someone's able to bring to me there that we can find there. And they've got a natural communication style and a natural social order that's very similar to our own social system. We all have different roles and different strengths within our herd. It takes all of us really, truly for successful survival. We may not feel like it now when, the food on our table can come from the cash in our hand and our safety is behind these walls. But really, as a human herd, we need each other as well as these horses. So that's the beauty. It's a natural reflection, and they work so well with us because of this need to communicate with their herd as a whole, both verbally or through noise, but also energetically through body movement, all kinds of nonverbal language. And we receive those messages in a much more open format with the horses when they, sorry, I have a guest that showed up in here. When they, because they're so non-judgmental, they're very, very authentic, and we can feel that within ourselves. We don't have to be politically correct with these horses. We don't have to necessarily worry about hurting their feelings like we do sometimes with other humans. And in doing so, we block some of our natural receptors, or we don't send out the signals. We spend effort trying to not send out the signals we might be feeling, the warnings, whatever it is, or the excitement even, to not disturb the situation. With these horses, it takes away all those blocks. We can get back to our intuitive feelings, that gut instinct, and really just share and receive what's going on back and forth energetically and emotionally.
Mm-hmm. Because I assume the language of the horses really is like without, language, but they do have their own, oral tongue without words. So it's a totally different communication style. It's really based on your energy and your emotions and body language too, right?
Yes, body language, but a lot of that is energetic. You can do exactly what you're told with your body, but if your inside energy isn't matching that, you're still not going to get a fluid reaction from that animal. For example, I had a riding student just last night. I took her out on a ride, and we could compare kind of the differences in when we went out on a trail before to when we went out this time. And she said last time, well, I'm doing everything correctly. I'm doing this that you told me and this that you told me, but this horse is still just all over the place. But this time we did some breathing exercises, some calm down before. And we talked about how it's going to be you being confident, being clear, just opening your awareness on this ride to help this horse calm down. And we did have an incident where some things startled the horses. And she recognized even before it was going to happen that her horse was tensing up and he was seeing something. And so I said, okay, so now what can you do to help him feel more confident that you've got this, you're in control, and she just took some breaths. She centered herself and grounded herself, and that allowed her horse to be able to say, okay, she's in charge. I don't have to worry about this. Let's just keep walking. They had a little jump and then was able to quickly calm down. And she was like, oh my gosh, I can feel the difference. He can feel me through this leather, through this saddle, through everything. And I felt him. It was one of the biggest moments. She was able to consciously recognize the feeling, this crank up of energy and this turn down of energy. And it's amazing to see. And we accept it more when we feel that. We've all felt it in a room with other people. There's those times someone walks in the room and you already, as soon as they do, you don't even know who it is, but you're tense. It just brings you up. Or that person that comes in and you already want to move away because it just feels heavy. But we try to pretend we're not feeling that or something with humans. With these horses, we can just allow those feelings, kind of even wake them up. Sometimes because of so much technology, so many other things, we've had to numb those down. And we can reawaken those and be authentic with ourselves in what we're feeling and what we're going through. So whether it's horse riding or it's through some exercises, it builds this wonderful, safe place. We can get back to what we're really feeling.
So what are some of the connections or the similarities between how the human herd and the horse herd, how are they the same? When you had kind of mentioned that earlier.
Well, for example, a social hierarchy, they will, to keep things clear and safe, if danger was to come, they need to know who is the horse in charge. Just like us, we have our leaders on different levels, because if something was very serious, or even within our families, when everything falls apart, you typically know who you're going to go to, whether that's family, or just your group of friends, right? There's that person who has a little more calm, a little more awareness, or just a little more experience, so they can be the go-to. And it's very fascinating. If you study animals, very frequently it's actually the female, where men sometimes think they're leading the charge or saving the day. That is great. But I hate to tell you, in a lot of animal species, it is that very forward movement energy, because they're a little bit more expendable. It only takes one or two males to keep an entire herd repopulating. So it's funny. While there's very strong, very powerful stallions or geldings or males out there, it's actually a lead mare that the herd is going to center around in a time when they really need movement, a time they need direction. The lead mare has typically been there for a very long time and also has a lot of strength and awareness. If you were to look out in the field, you may not even be able to pick her out. But when it's a time for action, even if it's just, say right now we're kind of in a drought, if they were in a wild herd, they would need to move to a new place with more grass and more water. And it would be the lead mare who would know the directions and know where to go from her previous experience. And then you've got those below her that are being kind of almost in training to fill that position as that horse gets older. You've got your young ones who are just learning how to be a part of the social structure, whether that's school for humans or the other activities they do, like clubs and organizations, or in the horses. You can watch as boundaries are really set well for those young ones. They can find safety and freedom. They can play and learn the skills they need to learn, because they also know where the boundaries are. They're safe here to goof off and be however they want to be, because they know they're not going past this point. They've got their kind of sentinels, their horses that are always watching that outside perimeter. Just like with some people, oftentimes there are those who are more comfortable, maybe not in the middle of everything, but that doesn't mean they're still not a part of that community, just because they don't want to be in the center of everything that's going on. So there's all those roles. And what I really love about the horses, and a piece we can learn, is to find your role, find your inner talent and gift, and own it. Don't try to be something that you're not, and just find the power in your own thing. They don't try to pretend that they want to be something else. They don't all strive to be the lead mare just because that title sounds the coolest. There's just as much value in every one of those roles, or those more aggressive horses who are going to be on the lookout and maybe approach something that would be dangerous. You know, a horse that is naturally good at helping to train and raise the young ones does not need to be the one to approach the coyotes coming in the evening to scare them off, or to move them away, or let the herd know they need to move. And I find it fascinating when we bring people in with the larger groups of horses, what they reflect and see, some of the shadows in themselves that they see when they originally look at the herd, and how we can bring a light into those shadows as we discuss what the roles of those individual horses actually are. We come in with our own judgments, but we can open up and see a whole new world of possibilities, and we can appreciate all of those roles so much better. I love bringing in business teams because no matter how much we can discuss and justify our roles within our company, it still feels like this top-down hierarchy sometimes, instead of more of an equal perimeter, equal value in those roles. And it allows us to really see that firsthand and acknowledge the necessity, the value in all of those different roles, and the different personality types it takes for those roles. So we can learn to appreciate all the different personality types.
Yeah, I can really see how that would, because it's, say business is a good example, because there are, your designated roles on paper, but there are also those nonverbal and energetic roles. And I love the idea of, getting a group together in front of a group of horses to reflect that dynamic and how we can learn from that, because we've got, whether we're aware of it or not, this order is happening, right? And maybe in the past, previously, we were more connected to our roles, some Asian cultures, that I've come across through my travels, I've seen, like Indonesia comes to mind, because they even have different names for their firstborn, secondborn, third, fourthborn, right? And each one will be a different role. And, so that's very traditional and cultural, but, that must come from some connection that we've had with just observing the natural order of, the animal kingdom, or how we've actually evolved and survived over the times is through these herds, right? And there's a lot of this, the way we've set things up based on this herd, mentality. So I love that reflection. It just seems something so raw about it. And like you say, it's like the boundaries, or the barriers that you would hold up normally, because there's some conflict. So this is then where I've seen from the Eastern perspective or the Western perspective, let's just say in a general sense, East is more traditional, and they've got those roles more set. And then in the West, we're so free. So that's the other aspect of the horse, right? Just this freedom and flexibility. But maybe we're missing that boundary, that those roles. And then you get a little bit disassociated, lost, and that's a little bit isolating, depressing. And so really finding your role is, some of that order and that boundary is really beneficial. Is that making sense?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And in fact, I've got a book that will hopefully come out this coming year. And I talk about a piece of that. This is really a book about parents and teenagers, but that, looking at these herds, the youth can actually find more freedom when they know where the boundary is. Without the boundary, it actually increases a level of anxiety and fear that just changes their whole dynamic of how they're living, versus when that boundary is set, they're completely free within that boundary. And another piece to be looked at is it's also fascinating to watch these animals. If you bring in new animals or you change the structure and the level of the herd, there will be some physical signs. They will show some physical aggression or boundary setting. But the thing is, they don't hold a grudge over it. They are negotiating those boundaries because they need to know who is going to hold which position. And after that, it's over. Okay, we decided. And that is a huge piece we can all learn in our lives and in our businesses, within our families. Just because that bay horse nipped me on the butt yesterday, I'm not sitting in the corner mad because that happened. It was part of negotiation. It may look big to us, but compared to their size, it's not a big thing. But they'll, whether it's ear pinning or nipping or even just baring teeth, or it's actually a kick or some sort of a body push. The moment happens and then they move on. The thing has been set. The outburst has happened so that we can figure out, who's the strongest, or even to figure out who is not the strongest, because then they're going to have a different job. You don't want to put somebody in the wrong spot. And how that they can release that, where they never had the thought to even hold on to it. And interesting how we've changed, and somehow we can waste so much energy making up stories about what happened, versus just acknowledging, hey, we were just energetically trying to make some agreements and moving forward.
Yeah, like that negotiations, because
very big, but they're also very honest. Where sometimes we're so busy negotiating with words, nobody's really saying what they're feeling.
Right. Yeah, because we're not really quite trained to say how we're feeling. So this comes back to the communication, assertive communication and clear communication.
We've been untrained. Go talk to a 5-year-old.
Right.
And they'll tell you exactly what they're thinking, more than you ever wanted to know. So we've actually been untrained from communicating in that way.
So what are your thoughts around that? Like, where does that come from or stem from, or what role is that playing?
Well, I think
with our herd,
there's a time and a place for niceties. I definitely want to make sure people are comfortable in a room. I don't want to be rude or hurt somebody's feelings. But I think as we continue our own personal education as well, you have to worry about that less. It isn't false, because now you know where you truly feel on, say, judgmental issues, prejudging or prejudice. If people have a deeper level of education or just experience with those things that maybe they are feeling uncomfortable with, then that can start to dissolve. But in the meantime, we have to make this politically correct vibe and feeling versus experience. We'd be a lot better off just to experience that thing which we might have prejudice or misconceived notions about, versus trying to just say things that won't stir the pot, that won't hurt anybody's feelings.
This reminds me of something you said earlier about when someone approaches the herd and where they might feel they have their shadows or some resistance to. It's like we're taking that energy. Okay, notice that's getting a lot of attention, or that's something that, I don't know if triggers us, or just heightens our awareness around, oh, maybe there's something here. So it's like confronting that and approaching it versus, resisting it.
Yes, and opening it for discussion around it. For example,
the discussion.
If you bring people out, they could all look out and look at one horse. And one thing that very frequently happens, we can never predict what exactly is going to happen, but one thing that frequently happens is people come out and they will see a particular horse, and they will each have a different view of that horse. Some may say there's a horse on the outside, and some may say, oh, that poor horse, he looks so lonely. and they'll be very sad for it. And some will say, does that horse just not care about anything? What is he doing out there? And another might say, oh my God, look at that horse. He's so brave and confident. He does not even need the rest of these guys. Whew, I want to be that horse. And we can come into discussion about that and just open a doorway of who else is feeling those feelings, or who else has that role in your herd. Maybe you can look at them differently. That horse typically will be playing more of a sentinel role. They don't want to be aggressive, negotiating all the time in the herd, but they're on the outskirts. There's less confrontation with the inside, but they're also constantly keeping an eye out if there's anything going on in the outskirts that they need to make a decision on. Are they going to move from that? Are they going to go towards that? When we can see that as that other person that's more out by themselves, maybe that person who is feeling a little sorry for that horse can actually just respect what the person who isn't just like them in the middle of everything. They can just respect their space and how they're feeling, not patronize them or want, that person always wants to bring the horse in and cuddle it, and actually that horse is just fine.
Yeah, and is playing a vital role among the herd. I love that. So there's the benefit of having our roles and those boundaries of our designated position,
but
because that strengthens
the big energy when we're with these horses as well. Whether it's to some extent, it can feel very magical, very mystical, or very spiritual. It can also be measured energetically. If you look at heart energy, right? They can measure the energy of a human body up to 3 feet outside of your body. And so if you have a horse whose heart is over 5 times larger than a human heart, how much actual more energy is being pushed that we're able to share with them? We're inside that circle of that energy. Mm-hmm. It's interesting to watch the rise that it brings in all of our emotions, the energy we're feeling, and the discussions it can bring up. You've got this non-judgmental creature. So emotionally, this non-judgmental feeling helps us feel safe to share. And an actual physical energy. If you think of our bodies as little test tubes that have been holding in all of our feelings and all of these thoughts, if it's up to here and then you add more, sooner or later, things have to start coming out that maybe had just been buried down in there for a while, if that makes sense. But it's amazing to watch it open these doorways, and people can become much more open, share things that they've just been holding down. When we get into the energy of these horses, it's a magical space. It's amazing that they share this with us. And I also wonder if sometimes we're missing it, and that's why we are reaching out so much.
Right. Because we're moving too fast, and we're kind of missing that slower pace horse time.
Where if we have the same discussion, we could have the same discussion with a group in an office, but it will not release the same conversation that it will when we're actually in the space with the horses. I guess.
Yeah, and maybe that's part of that heart energy and that intuition. I would love for you to share more about that, because when you speak about the lead mare, I think of, well, that must take a great deal of intuition and foresight and ability to be, perceiving the whole picture, right? What's best for the herd, what's best like in this moment, what's happening in this moment, and to be able to analyze that and perceive and sense that. I mean, but maybe that carries out throughout the whole herd, but this,
well,
how can we utilize?
The other thing, I'm sure there's a lot of lead mares out here watching your show, Nicole.
Yeah, sure.
A lot of strong women. And I think the biggest thing we can learn from the lead mare in the herd, she just does that one job. She doesn't try to do everybody else's job. And sometimes we as humans get a little lost in to try to do these other pieces. Her job is not exhausting. In fact, until there is a real need for her skills, she may even look like she's expending the least amount of energy. She's not looking for stuff that's coming. She's not overthinking, do we need to move now from a predator? Do we need to go now? for more food and water. Like she's not checking her clock every minute. She's allowing the others to let her know that, and she is trusting them in their role. She trusts those horses on the outside that they're going to pop their head up real quick and let her know if there's a reason they need to start paying attention. She's not going to expend that extra energy checking in on them. It's already been agreed, and she trusts that. Those that are helping raise the young ones, you know, sure, if they come in her space, she's going to interact, but she's not going to overexpend herself or be checking in. Are they doing that correctly? Did they do X, Y, and Z, you know, on that list? She's going to trust them to do that. And then her wisdom that she has to bring forward when it's time is coming from experience. My motto is leadership through experience, because we can talk about it all day long, but until you've been through patterns or you recognize moments in your life that you take your awareness from and your knowledge from, leadership's just a word. But until you can own that experience that you've had, we've all had our own leadership experiences. And until we put in some effort to gaining more experience, it's hard to hold that true leadership role or that lead mare role. She doesn't have to waste more energy because it's already within her.
I love that. That's a really wise position to be in.
No, she's
right?
not a helicopter mom. She just
Yeah.
trusts.
Yeah.
Not just for children, but for anybody. So many of us, because we want things to go right, we want to control it. I'm talking to myself right now.
I think this relates to a lot of women for sure.
So many people, you know, whatever role, but versus just fully trusting them. And if it doesn't work, well, then we'll figure it out then. But don't waste energy when most of the time it goes just right. You choose your herd and their roles wisely, and then you let them do their thing. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, if you see the lead mare out in the herd, most people don't pick her out. They typically pick out a different horse because that horse is a little more interactive and looking and involved, where she's conserving her energy for when she needs it.
Right. So some proper delegations, and I love that word trust. But there's got to be a lot of experience has to be there, because without that experience or that training or observing someone else in that role, mm-hmm. you know, there's probably a lot of curiosity, like, you know, okay, I have this role, so there's all these moving parts, right? And how do I really?
There's time. She's not. You don't. You know, a 2-year-old doesn't just jump. A 2-year-old horse doesn't just jump to the lead mare status.
Right.
They've been around. They've been experienced. They've learned.
So how is that decided? I guess now I'm just curious.
Because the lead mare in training as well in a larger herd. Say, for example, my herd. I would assume after watching a lot. Which horse out of my mares would step more into that role. And if there is no mare, obviously there's going to be a male that fulfills that role more. But naturally in a wild horse setting, it's going to be the female. She's also going to be more protected in the middle. She doesn't lead from in front or above. She leads from the middle or the back to help push everybody forward. But part of it is strength and awareness. Part of it is kind of, do they even want it, right? I have a mare out there that I don't think she'd want it if you gave it to her. It's just not her thing, right? Like you see some people, you can have somebody with all the potential in the world, but if they don't want it or they want something else, you know, they want a different position. She's much more observant and she wants to move fast and be out on the edge. She wants to approach things if it strikes her curiosity. Versus be watching everybody else and their reactions. So
through the herd, you know, I'm just thinking about people and how we interact with each other, and when we're looking for that extra, you know, something like you mentioned before, what are we seeking? Is it that connection, or is it that we look to horses maybe to reflect our role, or maybe more of our purpose. And yeah, so what are some exercises or practices if we don't have access to horses? How can we get more in touch with some of those parts with ourselves? Where do we fit in, and where are we best served?
I think the biggest thing is reawakening, purposefully practicing using our awareness, our larger awareness, but not making any stories about what we become aware of. And so in awakening that, in some awareness practices that I'll talk about in a second, that leaves room for us to recognize our natural intuition. And it's your natural intuition that's going to help guide you towards your purpose, right? Versus what do I really feel? What do I really desire? Versus what would be a smart idea? What should I do? You know? And so an example of an exercise like that, a way that we typically start a lot of our programs is just to go outside in silence and notice what you notice. It sounds simple. Set a little timer on your phone, spend 3 minutes even, because you'll sit there and look and go, okay, I saw some stuff. But set a timer and really be out there and use all of your senses and notice what you notice. What do you hear? What do you feel? What do you smell or sense or see? And when you do notice it, try to take that and just put it on a shelf before you make up any stories. Okay, I could go out right now and I could see 3 hawks circling around. And I could say, okay, well, that means that there's probably some mice down in the field, or it means they just got kicked out of a tree, or it means whatever. Or you go out and you see somebody that's stomping down the road. You go, whoa, that dude's mad. Well, do we know that? No, it could be a number of things. They could just be exhausted. They could be confused or lost. Who knows? And so versus writing those stories, catch yourself writing the story and just set it on the shelf and be open to what else you see, what else plays a part in that. Just be aware. If we take some time with that awareness, say that person's approaching you, and at first glance you think they're grumpy, but you just put that to the side and you're just aware and tuning into all you're feeling, all you're seeing, and that person approaches. Maybe they're crying. Maybe they are head down snickering. They've got their ear pods in listening to something ridiculous. It changes the story entirely, and it would change how we would approach them. So if you can do some practices wherever you are, do it a couple times a day. Go out when you go to lunch and spend 2 or 3 minutes just being aware in your space. Go shopping and do an awareness exercise. That can be very interesting and a very difficult practice to put those stories away and just be aware. There's a person, there's whatever, here's what they're doing. It is beautiful and wonderful to do it out in nature, just to reawaken all of our senses versus just visual. But, you know, if you're in the city, just get out and be aware somewhere. That helps slow you back down to horse time. That helps awaken those senses that we've told to be quiet because we need to behave in a certain way. And again, allows time for that reawakening of your intuition. Maybe you just feel pulled in a direction when you're slowing down and noticing. I really want to go around that corner. You don't have to know why or the story, but you can choose whether or not you follow that pull that you slowed down long enough to see or feel. I'm sure you've done some similar practices, but to really make the effort to do that and feel those things is the first part of wakening all that back up. I had a young student the other day. When she first came to ride with me, in the first 10 minutes, everyone in her family, including herself, told me she had severe anxiety. But this is going to be tough because she's got severe anxiety, but she wants to learn how to ride. And by the second ride, the discussion we got into was, actually, you should feel nervous. I would rather have somebody getting on my horse feeling a little nervous. This is a large creature and you're a tiny kid, you know. If you don't feel nervous, then something's wrong. You're not, you know, that's not good. People get in trouble with horses when they've shut it down so hard they aren't feeling anything, or when they're pretending that they're not feeling a little nervous, right? And so I said, let's reframe that. Instead of going, oh my gosh, I feel anxiety, and being mad at it or being embarrassed about it, recognize this is your body saying, whoa, we're about to do something on a giant creature. I feel a little strange. You need to recognize it and actually appreciate it. I said, pat yourself on the back every time you feel it and go, okay, thanks, body, for telling me something big is happening. And now here's what we're going to do, and move forward with it. And as she's proceeded in these last 6 weeks, the other day she rode and we were about 10 minutes in and she goes, oh my gosh, every time I come here, I ride I'm on the horse for about 5 minutes and all of a sudden, all of my anxiety goes away. I don't feel worried about anything and all I think about is just riding my horse. Those are the doorways we can open when we start acknowledging all we're feeling energetically and through all of our senses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. The theme of these practices about slowing down and breathing and being aware is, you know, I think shows itself in so many different ways or different lines of work. Because in emotional wisdom training, that's what we train to do, is to become, you know, first you have to kind of like slow down and stop and be able to see, you know, gather the information that really makes the difference and not to attach a story to it. I love that you touched on that, because that's our instant, that's from our previous programming, you know, our previous experiences, that we've decided that since then it's this feeling, that belief, this thought, and this action reaction. But to really slow down and give that opportunity to have a new perspective and feel what we're feeling instead of shutting it out. And I think it's really beautiful that you have, you know, stories such as that, you know, young girl you're working with that could really feel that and move through it. And I mean, that's going to reflect in her life forever. How could it not? That's the beauty of working with these animals, or doing some, you know, leadership coaching, or, you know, working with a mentor in deciphering a bit of that language, right? Yeah.
And she's noticed that the more she acknowledges it and accepts it, just appreciates it even, the less the horse responds to it or is triggered by it, the less the horse is worried about it.
Right.
Versus,
yeah,
again,
she's more
mirroring the worry. If she makes it a bad thing, then the horse is going, what do we need to be worried about? If she makes it like an awareness thing, an open thing, something to just recognize and appreciate, then the horse could just move on with her, just like she's moving on within herself.
Right. Negotiation done. Moving on. Okay, Amanda, thank you so much for joining us. How can people find you and connect more with you, and maybe even work with you and learn more about this work?
Yeah, thank you so much, Nicole. Check me out on Facebook at Amanda Kumiko Kent. We'll have a launch of a website coming this fall. So just click in there and like me and you'll get all the details. We'll reshare this interview there so we can see a little more of Nicole and answer any questions that you might have. You can just post them right in there. And we'll follow up. We'll have that website, and we'll have a book coming out next year, and a lot more fun. If anyone is interested, again, the beautiful part, this is nothing we train in the horses. This is all completely inherent, something that's part of their natural way of being. I love traveling around to share this in other locations. It's part of what I do. Travel to different.
Well, I think Alberta would welcome you.
Yes, I was going to say I need
the prairies
clients, but maybe we'll be there next spring.
Okay. All right, sounds good.
In Alberta, we got to have pretty similar winter times.
Yeah.
But of
I'm
course,
sure.
Alberta
Yeah.
might be tough enough. They wouldn't care about doing it out in the snow.
No, we're robust. You do
Put
what
on
you
your
got to do.
jacket. Let's go out and do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
It is.
Long johns and jacket. You just dress for the weather. That's
Perfect.
it.
It's not going to bother the horses.
Yeah. Good. All right. Thanks again. And thank you for listening and tuning in to our audience. And we'll leave you with this question of what will you take with you from this conversation that will support you for the rest of your life?
Wow, what a show today, and the journey does not stop here. Come travel the world with Nicole every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time as together we become more fluent in the language of healing on W4CY Radio and Talk 4 TV. See you next week.